Hey everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to the channel. And in the last video you saw where I had gone through and replaced or cleaned up a lot of the brake components. Today we're gonna go ahead and get all these on the car, but there's a side of me that every time I see something on the car, I'm like, well, this is the opportunity to fix it. Some tie rod ends, things like that I've noticed that are probably worth going ahead and changing because they look like they're in pretty bad shape. I do also want to get the parking brake cable pulled off and replaced, which is going to be a pain in the butt because it looks like it's quite rusty, but I'll show you the best I can. But that's one of those things that's it's going to be hard to film because it's all up underneath the car, and I'll do the best I can, but it might be doing it and then showing you outside the car and showing you a diagram or something. Anyway, it's a scorcher of a day. I'm already out here sweating just trying to get things set up, and if you hear anybody laughing or some random music here and there, some of my neighbors are having a little bit of a pool party, so you'll have to excuse me for that. I think the first thing I want to go ahead and do is probably go ahead and do the hardest thing that I think is going to be today, and that's doing the parking brake cable, just because I'm going to be eating some rust and busting my knuckles trying to get that out of there. So essentially you have part of the handbrake that goes from the handle inside. There's a mechanism that's inside the transmission tunnel, and then it goes to a semicircular connector thing, and that's where the cable that goes out to each side connects into. So it's really that last half that I'm replacing. I'm not really fiddling too much with the handle or what's in the transmission tunnel. It's just because the connectors that are on the ends of the parking brake cable that I have are pretty shot. So I just got a new one. I want to replace that. There looks to be some inconsistencies in the part that I picked up versus the part that I took off, so I got to look at that as well. So let me just give you a quick update on what we have right now, and we got a lot to do. My friend Zach from Shooting Cars has been trying to get down here for the better part of a year to drive the Datsun. He's supposed to be coming down this week, and obviously can't drive it if it's sitting here on the lift without brakes. So I've got a lot to do. I want to make sure it's safe for anybody that might be driving it. But then after that, obviously there's lots of things, bushings, weather stripping, and like I said, we're going to go deeper into the plans for this build and really what I want to accomplish. But the first step is to get this thing drivable. So let me show you what we've got with the brakes, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So up front, my spindles had a little bit rust on them. I've cleaned them up. The lower ball joint and the tie rod and other things that I'm seeing, I do have replacements for all this, and that was in my plans to replace anyway, but I could do that after the brakes, but it's one of those things, I see it, so I kind of want to take care of it. And you can see all the grease that's come out of the boot around the tie rod end, and the linkage and things like that. There's lots of bushings that have to be replaced. So that's a separate issue that'll probably be in one of the next projects, because these things are completely shot. I know it'll be a little bit harder to see. I'm gonna have to overlook that for now. We're not gonna be driving it on the track or anything, so that'll be okay. But I do want to go ahead and probably drop these, get those replaced, and then really it's just the assembly, putting on the calipers and bleeding the system. So I'm hoping that that's not too big of a pain. Obviously, getting some of these rusty fasteners, there's always a risk, but I shot these all down with PB Blaster a little bit ago, so they've been soaking, so hopefully they come right out. I'm going to basically take this little linkage off the bottom of the spindle, and then there's 4 bolts to hold the ball joint in. So I'm hoping I can just do all that real quick while it's sitting here. And of course the tie rod end, I'm just gonna do the outer. Inner probably needs to be replaced too, but just the outer for right now. So that's that for the front. And then the backs here are what I was saying. It's basically just leaving these alone. I'm not doing the bearings or anything right now. They feel okay. I've cleaned up this backing plate. It probably could use some paint, but I said I'm basically gonna just do this temporarily, and eventually all this is going to come out, because I gotta do a bunch of work back here anyway, replacing suspension, the rear diff, all sorts of things like that. So back here, it's just basically going to be reassembly of the drums and all that good stuff. But then, of course, like I said, mentioned a minute ago, I've got the parking brake cable, which, this part really just goes up, and then there's a hanger that's hard to see, but it's about right where my finger's at, and then the cable turns towards the front of the car, and then right up in here, kind of in the transmission tunnels, where that semicircular bracket thingy is that I need to get to. Ultimately, that's my goal, is to get this removed. Probably the first thing we're gonna go ahead and start on, and so I'll decide if I can get anything on film. If you don't see it, I'll try to explain it the best I can outside the car. So I'm over here on the left-hand side of the car. It's difficult for me to film because it's dark, but there's a stud sticking out towards the front of the car, has a 12mm nut. Even though it's covered in undercoating and probably rusty, it's coming off quite easy. So the other side is the same. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these off, and then hopefully those hangers will just slide off and most of the cable will be free at that point. So I think I can give you a little bit of an angle. So this is right at the front of the diff, and right up there, kind of on the bottom of the floor pan / transmission tunnel, you'll kind of see a cable and what kind of looks like a spring. I'll put a circle on it there. And anyway, there's like a normal retaining clip like you would have to remove like the soft lines from your brake system. You have one of those. It looks like it's a little rusty and dirty so you can't see it, but that'll pull straight down, and I believe that will free up the cable. But I do think that I may end up having to take a little bit more off because I'm not sure. I mean, of course I could cut it because I'm not using it. Anyway, I think I gotta pull that clip off, and there's another one on the other side which you can't see. So I'm gonna get both of those off and see if that releases the cable. So after a few minutes of fiddling around, I got the cable out, and the two, the little, clips that slide in, I just used my seal pull tool because it's hooked and it was just the right length that I could reach up in there and just pull straight down, and they popped out. So once I got that out, everything was basically loose, but I did need to go ahead and take this little mechanism, which that's a little semicircle piece right there that I was talking about. And it just has a pin and a cotter pin and a brake in mine, but you just slide that out and then that spring just hooks on to a tab that's up there. It's all pretty easy to see and get to. And once you have all that out, I just pulled it out through the left-hand side and it came out in one piece. It does look like we're gonna have to take and thread that little shaft off because otherwise the cable is trapped. So hopefully that little thing up there at the top comes off, and then all this slides on. And then here's my new cable, and then I'll just make, because that cotter pin was so hard to get off, I'm just gonna use some galvanized wire and to tie off that pin. The hangers here will slide off the ends, and I can put those on and then get this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna take this end piece off and swap the wires over, and then we can go get it back in the car. So it's really easy to switch over the parts. I took the time to go ahead and clean these off, a little bit of dirt on them. They weren't too rusty. There's just a square nut right there that you loosen, and then basically you get everything off there, turn it sideways, you can push that bolt through, and then this all just comes apart, and then you put the new cable in and put it back together in the opposite order. But I did go ahead and grease anywhere where there's like, kind of sliding parts like around the cable. And this cable between these 2 points does appear to be just a hair longer than the one I just took off the car. So to counteract that, maybe I put I shortened this a little bit when I tightened it on. So probably brought it in about 1/4 inch. So I'm hoping that that takes up a little bit of slack. If it still feels loose or doesn't engage properly, there's a little bit more adjustment I can make there, but I might need to make more adjustment with the handle. So anyway, this will be going back in the car. I can't really film a lot of it because it's hard to see anyway. So let me get this popped in, and then I'll check in after that. So I did run into an issue, and the clip that slides up and holds the OE cable in doesn't fit the replacement cable that I got. It's much larger, but I believe there's basically 2 types of these clips on the car. There's the smaller one, which is used more or less for the parking brake cable and connections, and then the rest are all a little bit larger. So I tried one, and this width from side to side is too wide to fit up where this clipped in. So there's quite a bit of a size difference there. But this hole is probably the right hole, and the depth of that curve that kind of causes the spring to hold that in place, I think is the right size. So I found 2 of these from my scrap pile that are in okay shape, and I ground them down to be, they don't have to be as small as the factory because there is a little bit of wiggle room there, but I got it quite this width is substantially smaller than the factory clip. So I'm gonna try that now. see if these will work, because otherwise I don't know what the solution is. They didn't give any clips with the new cable, so I'll try these, see if that holds them in, and if not, I guess we'll try something else. So that ended up being the trick, just shaping that clip a little bit. I kind of pinched it in a little bit and then, bent it until it got a nice snug fit. So it's fit pretty good up there. I suspect that when we go to do the drums and the parking brake, it's going to be the same issue. I'll have to check that when we get there. But so this is fully installed. I got the hangers, you won't be able to see, but I got them mounted back up here. And this had a little, like an aluminum sleeve that could just slide along the length. So I made sure to put that right inside of the hanger. And I think that would let this cable move a little bit better than that rubber. Of course, that took way longer than I expected, but it's done. So now we can turn our attention onto these rear drums and then work our way forward. Satan himself invented drum brakes, and I absolutely despise working on them, and hopefully this is the last set I ever have to work on. The first thing we're gonna go ahead and do is get the new wheel cylinder in, and they're kind of universal, so this, the left and right sides look the same. Just make sure that your bleeder valve is on the top. I replaced the bleeder valve that it came with a speed bleeder at 7mm. I'll put it up on the screen. But basically this is going to get installed through this hole here at the bottom, and then it's two M6 fasteners. And like I said, I'm basically able to replace these with just some hardware that I had laying around. So it should be easy to get replacements if you've got to replace them yourself. Those installed with lock washers, so just cinch them down pretty good. And I think the next thing we need to go get is the parking brake mechanism and get that in. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of things we have to grease on the parking brake mechanism, but we do need to go ahead and take off this little plastic thing. And it basically, there's a little clip that you could just push out from the back side or the bottom side. This is basically going to feed through here. So we need to go ahead and grease the threads, the star adjuster, this mechanism here, and then we're going to pack some grease into the little piece that slides over the end. I'm just going to use standard black brake grease. I'm going to put a big blob of grease right on the end so that when we go ahead and push on the this extension, just kind of scraping some off my finger here. You'll have it full of grease when you start pressing it in. You'll hear, kind of bubbles popping and it just air trying to escape. So beyond that, I do want to get a good amount of grease back here, but really I'll probably just wait and do that once I've got this in. For the initial getting this together, that's what you're wanting. You basically have this clip kind of facing out, and you want this piece horizontal. And for now, we'll just feed this through here and over the wheel cylinder, which I found that you've got to take this off to get it over the wheel cylinder. And then we're just going to kind of let that sit there for a minute because we've got put on the shoes, and once everything's together, it'll kind of all hold itself. The next thing we want to focus on are kind of the shoes, which are generally just a pain because you've got all these really tight springs, and the rest of this job takes just a couple minutes. Putting the shoes on with the springs, that's where you're going to run into trouble because you've got to get it over the parking brake, the wheel cylinder. Up here you've got to get it around here, plus those springs are actually, they sit behind the wheel hub. But you can do it. It just takes some patience, or a little swearing in my case. But what we really want to do is go ahead and grease up all the bearing points for the shoes. So it's going to be 3 each side here, and then I'm going to put a lot of grease here. I'll go ahead and put some grease on the wheel cylinder and the parking brake adjuster. All right, it's not pretty, but we got grease on what we need to get grease on. So what I found, really, the next part is you're going to need some pliers. You're going to need all your bits and pieces at hand, because once you start setting this up there, you're gonna have to start holding it and getting the springs adjusted, and it becomes a real pain. So having all your parts handy so you can grab stuff. What I found is that if you're putting the front shoe on where it needs to go into the parking brake adjustment, because at least you got to get into 2 slots plus the top. The back side, you just got to get into the slot, then you've got to get over this little nub for the parking. So that's a little easier to do than trying to get these two. So we'll get the springs on both shoes and kind of start them over and try to stretch them around, and it's going to be a mess. But let me get everything set up and then we'll get the shoes on. One thing you'll probably want to go ahead and get out of your rebuild kit are the little kind of special looking washers and these little nail looking pieces. And basically there's a hole on each side of the, now this one you have to kind of wiggle it in from the top, and this one's a little more interesting to get in, but I like to go ahead and get them in place and then just pull them back to where they're not going to be in my way, but at least they're there. Because once I get the shoes on, I'll go ahead and use the first washer and put them on, and that'll hold everything so I can take my hands off of it. What we want to do is try to get this shoe, we'll leave the tops loose so that they can kind of move in together, and we're trying to get the bottom shoe on the wheel cylinder, and then the parking brake mechanism is loose, so we can use it to kind of wiggle around and get this aligned. So arguably we've got the hard part done. I've got both this side on the parking brake mechanism and the wheel cylinder. It's relatively easy to pull the top, so I'm not going to worry about that just yet. But now I need to get that little nub that comes off the parking brake through the little hole in this shoe. All right, so from here we're pretty much home free. Basically just need to get the tops of each of these behind this little pivot point, and it looks like we've got everything else. So this is just a matter of having enough strength to do it. All right, so I have it back to the way it is. I'll pay more attention about keeping the brakes kind of flattened, because as soon as you start bending this out, these springs really just want to break loose. So you got to watch that, which that's part of what makes this a pain in the butt. So I've got everything back on the wheel cylinder. I've got the parking brake mechanism back in. So this time I'm gonna just ever so carefully get that one over. And then this one, we got to watch the parking brake lever. So we're there and there. And this is what I was saying, it might be a good time to go ahead and probably use this mechanism here to hold on the shoe. So at least it won't go any further than that. And then this one, we just need to get the top over, and then hopefully, really, that's where we are. So as you can tell, this is extremely fiddly. Now comes, really, it's just the brute strength part of this, and that's getting these springs on. So we got to push all this in. You got these springs that are under quite a bit of tension. They do make a proper tool to do this, but I find pliers work just as well. So I want to go ahead, when I'm getting started, I want to make sure this is lined up. I'm going to hold everything together, use the pliers to press this in. I'm going to use my finger on the back to hold the little peg thing. I don't know what it's called, but the little the part that comes through the back. I'm using my finger to hold that so it doesn't spin, and really just pushing it all on there. Just take your time, have a good grip on the pliers. Use your hand to kind of help hold the caliper, the shoes all in. So there, we've got everything lined up. I'm gonna go ahead and press that back with my finger. See right there, it's the hardest part is that it wants to, the back part wants to spin, and you're putting so much pressure on this that inevitably it spins the fastener too. So all right, so I'm right-handed, so I went ahead and put that side on, but I turned the camera off so you didn't have to look at the back of my head. The shoes will have to center themselves, but try to eyeball it as good as you can. You know, just making sure that when we put the drum on that there's plenty of room. So what I'm going to do now is probably go back and touch up some grease on some of the stuff that I might have knocked off, and then I'm going to go ahead and clean because I probably touched all over the side. So I'll get some brake cleaner and go ahead and clean off the the shoes a little bit. Next thing we have to deal with is the rest of the parking brake. So this is the rubber grommet thing, and you'll want to get this on before you put that little pivot point. And I'll go ahead and mention it while I'm here that I did confirm I was going to run into the same issue with the parking brake cable coming in. So I found another old clip and trimmed it down to where it would fit, and we'll have to drive that in there. And I'll probably pinch this a little bit because it is, the inside dimension is a little bit more than the little thing here. So just get some pliers and pinch that in and drive it. So I've already done the other side, so I know it'll work, and that'll take care of that. But we will have some issues probably trying to get, because there's no slack. It's actually pulled pretty tight. So I may have actually pulled the handle of the parking brake while I was fiddling with it. So I'll need to lower the car down probably and check and make sure the handle for the parking brake is loose. So yeah, I'm gonna get this cleaned up, re-grease what I need to re-grease, and get this rest of this parking brake put together. I had basically made my own replacement hardline, which I've already set it up here and it fits. The downside, I think, is whatever length I got, I should have got 2 inches shorter and it would have been perfect, but there's a little extra, so that's fine. So it's bent around, and basically this part, it'll sit like this behind the back of the brake. This goes into the back of the wheel cylinder. This loops around. There's a hole back here that will meet into the rubber line, which because I will be doing a more substantial brake upgrade in the future, I just did get factory brake lines. But basically one end goes up here where this hard line comes down, and then it bends into the back of the bracket on the caliper. So not really much to see, but I will probably start with getting the hard line onto the rubber here, and then that'll let me get this installed and get this back onto the back of the wheel cylinder. And I did want to mention I got 4 new clips, 2 for each side, and one will go up here to hold the rubber line, and similarly on top of the brake in the back. I have all the lines secured, and again, just use new clips. So really the last thing that really needs to be done is an adjustment, but I need to do that with all the brakes kind of on the ground. I went ahead and put a little bit of copper anti-seize around the center just to stop the drum from sticking so much. And so with any luck, we might have to, so the drums, Obviously it'd been nice to polish this up, and I did try to clean it a little bit, but it's got, I don't know if this is some of the undercoating and whatnot, so I didn't get too crazy because again, this isn't going to be a long-term thing. But like I said, I need to get all the brakes kind of on the ground, and then I can start doing adjustments, make sure we don't have any leaks and bleed the system. So I'm not going to mess with the star adjustment, but I left the grommet out in the back and I got a new one. So once everything's kind of initially set and we do the final adjustments and make sure everything's working, I'll just pop a little rubber grommet there in the back, and that'll seal these back up. So yeah, that was a long freaking day, but you know, as per usual, running into problems along the way always slows you down. So I don't know if this will be the end of the video, but this is definitely the end of me for today. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my mess cleaned up. And like I said, the last thing we've got to do is get the fronts replaced, but hopefully that should go way easier than what we had to deal with here. So yeah, for all you that have drum brakes, I feel your pain, and definitely don't look forward to doing this again. But anyway, if you guys have any questions, comments, or recommendations for people that might be doing this project in the future, leave them down in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to catch you in the next one.